All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's Wednesday. It's 4 p.m. Pacific. Guess what? It's Starfinder Wednesday, and today we're going to continue our talk. We've talked a little bit about the AP that's come out, Dawn of Flame for Starfinder. But we're going to jump in with both feet because we've got the guest of all guests. We've got some fun stories ahead. We've got some anecdotes, but also we'll be talking about Dawn of Flame. We'll be doing all of that. And today we've got Sutter's in the house. James L. Sutter's here. Welcome so much.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be back. But also this is my first time on the show.
I know, right? It's the when you go back to your old home and
Yes.
they've renovated everything.
Oh my God! Every time I come out here to visit every so often, but it's always like that. Everything's always changing so fast.
Oh, that's and here's the funny thing. When I saw that Dark Galaxies, how are you? Thanks for being in the chat. When I saw that you wrote the first one, with the title of it is
Fire Starters.
I knew that. I was just testing you.
Yeah.
Nice work. When I saw that, I was like, oh, well, we have to have Sutter on the show. Like, he has to come back. And just so you know, I'm going to say Sutter a lot.
Yeah.
Because back in the day,
that was always what I was called around here.
Yeah, Sutter. And so it feels weird to call you James L. Sutter.
Yeah.
Because at the very least, it's James. But professional names are professional names.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I believe. Let me make sure. Okay, I did. I wrote James L. Sutter on your Chiron, so we're all good.
Well, yeah, I was always Sutter around here because I started about a year maybe after James Jacobs, and so the James was already claimed, and so I had to just be Sutter. For a while it was young Sutter because I started here when I was 20, and then eventually I got old enough to be like, could we stop that? Like,
it feels weird.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
saying young. You keep saying that.
I'm now one of the most senior people here. Maybe it should just be like, just Sutter is fine. But
let's see. It was we'll get into this later, BB. I want to address that. And Boozle, thank you so much for subbing. That's super awesome. So the reason why I thought, and just spoilers here.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate we're going to talk about fire starters a whole lot.
We've got a lot to cover.
We've got you here. We've got you, in the studio here. You have been around for a long time. You have been around. You've been working on Starfinder since before it was Starfinder, essentially. And so I thought, we want to talk about the AP and we want to get some of that out. But I want to hear some of those original stories.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Kind of, and so a lot of the stuff that I have, just to let you know, is kind of set up for some of the older stuff that you've been working on. So
absolutely.
Digging back in the brain case and finding those stories might be an idea. Black Rabbit,
totally.
Thank you so much for subscribing. So first of all, let's start with the beginnings of what ended up being Starfinder. How does that whole thing start?
Before we even do that, since I've been gone for a little while, does everybody in the audience know who I am and where I came from and why I'm here? So
let's start with that. So you've been here. You were here a long time.
I was at Paizo for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I started when I was 20. I started originally on the magazines, working on Dungeon. I mean, I originally started as even before I became an intern. I started as just sort of an odd jobs person. I was finding images for Lisa for the web store at a nickel a JPEG. So like that was the level of humbleness of my beginnings here. But then I worked my way up. I was on Dungeon. Then after the magazines, I was one of the people who helped make Pathfinder and Pathfinder Adventure Path. Did a lot of the early work there, development and editing, along with Jacobs and Eric and Sarah and Wes and everybody else, and Bullman, obviously. Then from there, I worked as a editor, developer. I launched, obviously with other people, the Pathfinder Tales line, and was the executive editor in charge of that, making sure, I was picking the authors, working on the novels, developing stuff, and then in charge of the editorial department. And then eventually, when it came time to do Starfinder, I got tapped to be the creative director on that. So I was the original creative director in charge of launching that game and leading that team. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then I stepped down right after the game's release at Gen Con, and I've been doing the sort of freelance writing thing ever since.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is when you say, the way you just told that story was, I became the creative director of Starfinder, the first thing I thought of was, well, there was already the ideas of Starfinder there.
Was, yeah.
And I think that from what I'm able to gather, you were very influential in that whole, the kernel that started that whole thing.
Well, now, to be fair, Starfinder, I think a lot of people on staff had wanted to do a science fantasy game. I know it had been, the name Starfinder had been kicking around with Eric for years before we did it. But I think a lot of people said, if Warhammer exists and Warhammer 40K exists, wouldn't it be cool to do a science fantasy version of Pathfinder? But it was just never the right time. But I had always been somebody who wanted to get science fiction into Pathfinder. And so from the very beginning, I'd been somebody who was always dropping little hints and doing gazetteers. Like, actually, I've told the story before, but in Pathfinder Adventure Path Volume 3, so when we were first starting to work on Varisia, James Jacobs had the map of Varisia, and he'd said a lot of the basic stuff about that and Thassalon and whatnot. But actually, a lot of the map was still empty. He had some things like Sandpoint that were really well detailed. And so, but huge swaths of it, there was nothing there. And so I had the chance to write the gazetteer that filled in a lot of that stuff. Nice. But when I did, I went nuts, right? We knew so little about the world that I was like, oh, well, I can do whatever I want. And so I had stuff like, I had a space elevator in Varisia in the original draft of that article. I can't remember, it might have been the Spire of Lemurus, I'm not sure.
Jay Franklin's ahead of you. He's already saying Varisia, the space elevator and everything.
Yeah, right. Like,
these are iconic things that you put in.
Well, and then, and it's a story I've told many times because, A, I was very proud of it, and B, immediately Wes Schneider and James Jacobs sat me down, who were the other two main folks working on Pathfinder Adventure Path, and they were like, this isn't bad, but it's not, like, you need to slow your roll. Like, this is not the time for a space elevator. But so I'd always been wanting to do science fantasy stuff. And then when I pitched the idea for Distant Worlds, the rest of the team was kind enough to let me sort of do kind of whatever I wanted with the rest of Pathfinder, Galarian's solar system. Because we had a few touch points, like we knew we wanted a red and green planet because Eric Mona loves the old pulps. I worked with him on Planet Stories. And we knew about Octurne because we had the whole Octurne Enigma thing from some early modules by Mike Cortez. But really, most of that, we didn't, that was it. We didn't know what else was in the solar system. We had a sense that, okay, well, there are, I can't remember if it was 11 or 13 planets, but I think it was, we had said both, and we needed to reconcile that, which actually played into, that was what created the diaspora, was the need to both have 11 and have 13. It's like, well, how do we reconcile that? Oh, well, maybe two of them blew up and created the asteroid belt. I've often said that retconning is how I like to work. It's not that I like to go back and change stuff. I like to go back and explain the seeming incongruities and make the story more interesting that way. So anyway, that was the genesis of Distant Worlds, the Pathfinder source book. And I that was really a labor of love for me. And then, of course, that went on to influence and kind of become the foundation of the Starfinder campaign setting, which is one of the reasons probably why I got tapped to be creative director.
Probably. Well, and so that's the thing is I'm looking through some of the images. I grabbed a couple things from the book, and I was only planning on doing a couple, to be honest. But then I found another one, and I was like, oh, so many of these things are relevant to Starfinder. It's just crazy how.
The whole book pretty much just got an update and became the Pact Worlds.
Yeah, and I think that the first question that I would have about that whole thing is when it came time to start saying, okay, this is Starfinder proper.
Yeah.
Okay, these things, they have to go. This stuff can't stay. I thought we were doing this. How do you determine what you're taking from there and what you actually can't do anymore?
Well, obviously, it wasn't just me, right? There was a whole team, both, the people who would eventually become the Starfinder team, but also at that early stage, it was kind of all the major stakeholders, the folks that were really senior, sitting around a table, and we just said, what do we love from Distant Worlds? And obviously I was most familiar with Distant Worlds, but a lot of people had read it. What do we want to make sure stays? Is there anything problematic? But also, what do we love from Pathfinder? What are the key touchstones that need to come forward to make this feel like futuristic Pathfinder instead of like a totally different game. And so there was stuff like, okay, well, obviously Hell Knights need to be there. And it's funny, actually, I think Wes Schneider, who was the original sort of architect of the Hell Knights, he originally wasn't convinced that we needed to have Hell Knights in there. And then I was like, okay, I see where you're going, but imagine you see this just like it's the beginning of Star Wars, right? Like you just see the massive starship heave into view, and then you see that it's got, like Citadel Enferak or whatever written on the side, and you realize that like the Hell Knight Citadels are now these giant battleship space station things, and you went, okay, fine, you sold me, like
just gotta put the right picture in.
There was lots of stuff like that, like a lot of things that are key to Starfinder were not guarantees, right? We went back and forth, trying to pick which races were going to be core races. Mm-hmm. Those were, some practically knife fights in the beginning. I was very fortunate as creative director to get to make some final calls, but obviously the whole point of being a creative director is not that you make all the decisions, it's that you facilitate, everybody on the team giving their input and figure out what the group as a whole thinks is best, right? Because usually, like, when you work with people as talented as the folks who are around here, like, going solo is not going to create your best work. It's that collaboration that takes things farther than you would have imagined things on your own. And so there were things like, Eric will probably hate me for saying this, but when originally I came to Eric with some of the races, we said, okay, I think we've narrowed it down. I think these are the core races for Starfinder. He said, Yosoki? Really? Like, do we really need rat people? Like, does anybody want rat people? And I was like, dude, if you trust me on anything, trust me on this, which is that you need rat people. Like, it won't be for everyone, but every gamer group will have that one person at the table who is super excited to be a rat, and they will be the sort of person who talks in a squeaky voice and sits on the floor so that they're shorter than everybody else. Like, those people will love it. And so he was convinced, and lo and behold, I think the Yosoki was the best-selling miniature when we launched the miniatures.
It's great. Like, as our Monday night game, I'm a Yosoki. Like, I play that, and I love it. I think it's great. The idea that there's like cheek pouches, and just like the flavor of that character is amazing.
But I mean, see, like, so that's that's me telling stories on Eric, but like, lest I seem to be taking too much credit, there were all sorts of things where the opposite happened, where somebody would explain to me why something that I thought was cool was dumb, or why it wasn't the thing we should do. I remember for a while there was a quote written on one of the whiteboards downstairs, I think, where it was something I'd said to Owen, where it was like, just once let me put my foot down and keep it down, because they would just, like, every time I drew a line in the sand, they would convince me to back up over it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that's the point of working on a group, right? Like, you save each other from making bad decisions.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And, the best part about that is that with the idea of what Starfinder is supposed to be, which is that cantina feel, like there's, you can play almost anything, I think that all is helped by having those different points of view.
Well, I think we managed to get, like, even just the question early on of what is this game supposed to be? What is it supposed to feel like? Was really important, because, like, in the beginning it wasn't even clear, are we actually going to do Pathfinder in the future, or does that ruin everything? The gap was very much created as a way to make it so that you could have Starfinder without ruining Pathfinder. You didn't want everybody to know the future of Pathfinder in the same way. And so that, combined with my own sort of fascination with amnesia and what, how that works at a societal level, kind of created the gap. But there were all sorts of things that we didn't know. Like, was it going to be more of a starship-based game? Was it going to be more about what I really wanted? At first, I thought we didn't need starship combat. I was totally wrong. Yeah, so there's an example of where I was not right, and I think it was primarily like Jason Bullman and Rob McCreary who convinced me, like, no, the starship is a key part of the game. In fact, I think it was Eric who used to say that, like, a good starship is a character. Right, like the Millennium Falcon is a character. The Serenity is a character. It's what binds your group together and gives you heart. And I think that became a key thing in the game. But what was really important to me was that you still have the sort of more Pathfindery experience of, I want people to land on the surface of the planet and go, delve into alien dungeons and, do things hand to hand. I don't want, and one of the reasons, for instance, why we ultimately decided that starship weapons can't affect regular combat was because I just didn't want it to be the game where you drop rocks from space as the way to solve all your problems, right? Like that's,
right.
Even if that's believable, it's not fun. And that was one of the guiding lights of this game. Like there were a few tenets in making Starfinder. One of them was that it should be just as robust as Pathfinder, but easier to learn. And another one was, when in doubt, you need to go with what is fun, what is good at telling stories.
Right.
Don't worry as much about simulationism. If you can have simulationism, great. But go in there trying to tell the most fun stories you can tell. And that's why, I've heard people say, oh, Pathfinder's great or Starfinder's great because you can be really humorous, but you can also do horror, and that's being able to be all things to all people.
Right.
That was the gamble we took with Pathfinder, and it paid off, and we took it again with Starfinder, and I hope it's paying off. I hope you're all enjoying it.
Of course it is. Yeah, I think that
it seems like it is.
Just the fact, and I'm seeing. So first of all, there's an anonymous person in the chat going crazy, gifting out all kinds of subs. So thank you, anonymous person.
Nice.
And there's lots of people that are subbing and all of that sort of thing. And as that's happening, there's people in the chat saying, "This is a great community. It's really nice."
Yeah.
And other people are like, "Yeah, it is a great community. It's so nice." And I think that right now, the best thing is that we've got super supportive, excited gamers that want to play for game's sake, and they want to have a fun time, and they embrace the multitude of possibilities that you have, and so I think it's important to make sure that you and the current Starfinder team understand what you've given this community and how much fun they're having with it.
Yeah.
And all of that, it wouldn't be possible. All of these folks that are chatting right now, it's just amazing,
Yeah.
So it's a good system.
Yeah.
And so it's super fun. So let's talk about this. So I've got some creatures that I've put together that I've taken from the book.
We're gonna get straight into the interesting
So
stories.
look, I've already made my way to this one.
Yeah.
What is this thing called?
So this is called the Shodalashu now.
The Shodalashu.
Yeah, so in Distant Worlds, it was just a throwaway term because we needed a name. We knew that the Lashunta of Castrovel rode these sort of saurian mounts, but they didn't have a name. And so I just threw one in and I was like, oh, they have the Shoda, because that sounds cool. And it wasn't until actually we were working on the settings section for Pathfinder, or for Starfinder, the core rulebook, when I think it was Wes Schneider who sort of like busted into my office and was like, that doesn't mean what you think it means. That isn't.
Don't use that name.
Yeah, exactly. You need to change that. It is inappropriate.
Yeah.
And so then I did some Googling and went, oh no. And so that's we decided the best thing to do was just change it to Shodalashu.
That's not to say that you should be Googling that.
No, especially not at work. Although I have often said safe search. If you had safe search on my computer, I would not be able to do my job. The amount of times when I first started working here was like, I need to look up a black mass. I need to know how that works, right?
So
like
BB said, well, the last shoe part was fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Very true.
So retconning.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about the release of the book. It comes out. It's Gen Con.
Yeah.
We're not sure what's going to happen.
That was my best Gen Con of my life.
I think that it's fair to say that we didn't expect the reception that Starfinder got. We were just as surprised. So take me through that.
Of that, but
take me through that opening, doors open first day.
Oh well, I mean, so I will say I had been here for a few of Paizo's had a few smash successes over the years, and I had been here for all of them, most of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I remembered the release of Pathfinder and the beta and stuff like that. And the release of the adventure card game. Like I'd seen the flash mobs before. But it was different for me personally to have it be something that I was so close to and so passionate. I was on all those teams, but this was the first time where I got to be, the commander of the team. And so really, it was incredibly gratifying to see those doors open and then just everybody floods in. And, you know, the books were just going. And like we knew it was going to be good. We knew that people were excited about it, but we didn't have any idea the level of success. And so, I mean, I felt like a member of the Beatles, you know, being able to sit there, just like walk down the line and sign autographs. Like, it was great. It was so much fun. And it was just nice to see everybody so eager to play.
Mm-hmm. That was my first Gen Con with Paizo.
Oh God! Well, then they threw you right into the fire.
That was something. That was a good time though. It was a lot of fun. So,
and also I will say it was particularly poignant for me because for a variety of reasons, I had already privately decided that I was going to see the game through to completion and its launch, and then I was going to come back from Gen Con and I was going to resign after 13 years of the company. I mean, this was, you know. People talk about, you know, a family experience with a company, but like it's true. Like I had been here since before I could drink, so it was a big decision that had been a long time coming, but I hadn't told anybody. And so at Gen Con to have that huge reception and see this game that I loved so dearly launch and have that reception and know that like this is kind of my swan song. Like this is me sailing off into the sunset. Like it was the perfect time to do that. And no, of course I haven't left entirely. I'm still here writing APs, you know, and doing stuff. But it was like it was a good final note. It was the triumphant like climax of the movie, like, you know, where somebody comes back after having been away and just like boom.
You're the Steve Jobs.
Yeah, you're right.
Like didn't he leave and come back?
Am
I mixing that?
Well, I didn't really leave, but
oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a really amazing experience, and it made me feel like, okay, now I can go with a clean conscience. Like I have launched this thing, and
it was amazing.
Yeah, and to be fair, the whole team, like, it's not like I, you know, was like I did this. It's like no, we did this, and like. I left, but everybody who was working on it continued working on it, and it's been amazing to see what, you know, Rob and Owen and Jason and Joe and you know, obviously Sarah and Sonia and everybody have been able to do with it.
So here's the thing: I'm showing off the solar system right now.
Yeah.
The inside cover, which is one of my favorite pieces.
It really
love
is
this
for me
so
too.
much.
I love that.
When you first open your very first Starfinder book and you see that, it's just a world of possibilities.
Sarah's decision to put that on the end papers was just
it was perfect.
It sells everything.
It was such a good idea. So this is the problem, is that we have about 5 more minutes before we start the Q&A. So
do we want to do some quick Packworld's facts?
Let's do this. Let's pick your 3 favorite facts.
Oh God!
And we'll try to do it that way. Okay. And if not, we'll just maybe put some in the Q&A later. Who knows?
Let's see. Easter eggs. Abalon is named Abalon both because so it goes very fast. Like it's sort of our Mercury analog. So it's a combination of Apollo and caballo or caballo, the Spanish word for horse.
Yeah.
So that's also why it's the horse, is because it's like, well, what's fast? A horse is fast. That seems like something that Pathfinder would, you know, the people in a Pathfinder universe would name it after.
A horse, of course.
But yeah, so like that's where I drew it from. And for that matter, the answer is always Spanish for me, right? Like, why are the Ayudara, the elf gates, called Ayudara? It's because ayudar is to help in Spanish, and it just seemed really helpful to have teleportation gates.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. Kind of like, I hope that one doesn't break people's sense of reality too much. Like, one that is not mine, but like, when the day Jason Bullman, who introduced the Knights of Awesome, the day he first was like, hey, do you know why they're the Knights of Awesome? I was like, why? And he's like, 'cause they're awesome. I was like, oh, you just ruined that for me. I can't believe that you got away with that all this time. Let's see. Oh God, I'm blanking without specific planets to think about. Eox. Eox was directly inspired by the stories, which are maybe apocryphal, of the scientists that created the first atomic bomb. There was sort of this fear that perhaps they would ignite the atmosphere, and that the whole Earth's entire atmosphere could catch on fire. They just didn't know what would happen when they tested the first one. And so EOX was very deliberately a question of, okay, what if those scientists had been right? Like, what if test firing their weapon had destroyed all of the atmosphere?
That's so good.
Yes, that's kind of an alternate like, it's not an alternate reality Earth, but it kind of is. Let's see. Do we?
I like that. We have
more time.
So let's do this. I'm gonna do a wrap up.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up the show.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say goodbye to the YouTubers and the Facebookers, and then we'll do some Q&A with the finders in the chat there.
Sounds great.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you learned a lot about this is actually going to end up being more like the history of Starfinder.
Yeah,
kind of a continuation of the other show that we did. But I hope you learned a lot. I know that I did, and I had a great time, and the time went by so fast I didn't get to any of my questions. So we're going to spend some time in the chat talking to the finders there on Twitch. If you'd like to be a part of that, feel free to join us. We do this every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific at twitch.tv/official Paizo. If you like the video, if you learned something new, give it a like. Put down in the comments what you liked about it. Maybe a fun story. I'll make sure James sees the best ones down in the comments. We'll laugh and high five over the best ones. And in the meantime, for Paizo and for James L. Sutter here, and for me, I'm your old buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye!